Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are literally stepping into the shoes of historical detectives. Have you ever wondered how some of the most epic ancient stories actually stack up against hard, cold archaeological dirt? Well, we are going to map ancient texts directly onto established Egyptian timelines. We're looking for those exact moments where historical evidence and ancient narratives cross paths, unearthing the real history behind the tales of Joseph, the Exodus, and the birth of a nation. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at Joseph and the Hyksos, the oppression during the New Kingdom, dive into the Great Exodus dating debate, and finally look at some hard archaeological proof with the Merneptah Stele. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Joseph and the Hyksos. Our investigation begins with a massive historical anomaly. According to ancient texts, specifically the story of Joseph, a foreign Semitic slave somehow rises through the ranks to become the vizier, basically the prime minister of all of Egypt. Now, how does an outsider pull that off in such a highly insular empire? To understand that, we have to look at the Second Intermediate Period. This ancient tomb painting perfectly illustrates Asiatic and Semitic peoples actively migrating down into the Nile Delta roughly between 1750 and 1550 BC. And here's the kicker. They aren't invading with giant armies. They're migrating, settling down, and integrating. It proves that a massive demographic shift was happening in Egypt long before any single historical figure rose to power. And this migration, it completely rewrote the Egyptian governance structure. Over time, some of these Semitic settlers in the Nile Delta actually grew powerful enough to take the throne. The native Egyptians called them the Hyksos, which translates to rulers of foreign lands. Because the Hyksos were of Semitic descent themselves, they established a ruling class that was ethnically aligned with other migrating Asiatic groups. This gives us the perfect historical precedent. Suddenly, a Semitic outsider like Joseph rising to a top administrative position doesn't seem like an anomaly at all. Under the Hyksos dynasty, it actually makes perfect logical sense. Which brings us to Section 2. Oppression begins during the New Kingdom. But political winds always shift, especially in the ancient world. You might be familiar with this very famous text from Exodus. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. For the longest time, folks thought this just meant a king who forgot his history. But historical cross-referencing tells us a much more intense story. This text lines up seamlessly with the rise of the New Kingdom's 18th dynasty around 1550 BC. This wasn't just a new king. It was a completely new native Egyptian regime that aggressively fought back and expelled the foreign Hyksos rulers right out of power. So here is the crucial turning point. Once the native 18th dynasty took the throne back, what happened to the regular Semitic people, including the Israelites, who had settled in the Delta and didn't leave with the Hyksos elite? Well, the new Egyptian rulers viewed these remaining Asiatic minorities as a dangerous fifth column, a severe national security threat. To neutralize that perceived threat, the state initiated widespread state-sponsored enslavement and forced labor. This oppression wasn't arbitrary. It was a highly calculated political move by a recovering empire. So when did they actually leave? That leads us to Section 3, the Exodus dating debate. The massive departure of these enslaved peoples builds into the core conflict of our investigation today. Historically, archaeologists and scholars are split right down the middle into two major academic camps regarding the Exodus timeline. On one side, you have the early date theory, which places the event in the 15th century BC, right around 1446 BC. On the other side, the late date theory drops it into the 13th century BC, somewhere between 1270 and 1250 BC. So let's objectively weigh the evidence anchoring both of these fascinating theories. The contrast in the evidence here is honestly striking. The early date theory relies heavy on a mathematical calculation from the Book of 1 Kings. It states the Exodus happened exactly 480 years before King Solomon began building the temple. Since we know Solomon's fourth year was around 966 BC, you do the math and boom, it points directly to 1446 BC. Conversely, the late date theory zeroes in on a very specific geographic and architectural detail. Exodus 1:11 states the enslaved peoples built the store cities of Pithom and Ramses. Historically, the great city of Ramesses was built by the 19th dynasty pharaoh Ramesses II, which anchors this theory firmly in the 13th century BC. And speaking of Ramesses II, look at this colossal, imposing statue representing Ramses the Great. If we examine that 13th century late date theory because of the building of the city Ramesses during his reign, he becomes the pharaoh most frequently popularized in movies and media as Moses' ultimate rival. It's super easy to see why, right? The sheer overwhelming scale of his monuments perfectly matches that grand sweeping narrative of an empire at the height of its power. Okay, let's map these anchor points out chronologically to get our bearings. We start with the Hyksos period, Joseph's era, from 1750 to 1550 BC. Then we hit the two debated exit points, the early date in 1446 BC and the late date around 1250 BC. But take a close look at the final date in this sequence, 1209 BC. This is where things get truly undeniable. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 4, Archaeological Proof, and the Merneptah Stele. We have now arrived at the year 1209 BC, uncovering the most definitive archaeological anchor point we currently possess regarding the identity and existence of Israel in the ancient world. Erected by Pharaoh Merneptah, who was actually the son of Ramses II, by the way, the Merneptah Stele is this imposing ancient Egyptian victory monument carved right out of solid stone. It's essentially a giant billboard detailing the pharaoh's military conquest in Canaan. But hidden within these standard royal boasts is a microscopic detail that forever altered biblical archaeology. Buried within the hieroglyphs is this translated quote, "Canaan is captive with all woe. Israel is laid waste, his seed is not." Now, as incredibly harsh and boastful as this military propaganda is, its historical value is just staggering. This marks the very first verified historical mention of the name Israel anywhere in the world outside of religious texts. It is literally carved right there in Egyptian stone. But hold on, the true smoking gun is actually hidden in the grammar of the stone itself. Ancient Egyptian writing used something called a determinative, a symbol placed at the end of a word to show what category it belongs to. The determinative used next to the word Israel on this stele does not use the symbol for a settled city-state or a fixed foreign nation. Instead, it uses the symbol for a nomadic people or a wandering group of people. This is absolutely monumental. It definitively proves that by 1209 BC, regardless of which Exodus date you argue for, a distinct demographic group identifying as Israel was already established in the region of Canaan, not as a walled city, but as a moving, living people. As we close up this explainer, I really want you to think about how incredible this journey has been. We've traced the logic of Semitic migration under the Hyksos, understood the brutal politics of the New Kingdom, weighed mathematical timelines against architectural evidence, and finally stared down a 3,000-year-old carved stone that undeniably validates the existence of a people. It leaves us wondering, as we continue to sift through the sands of the ancient Near East, how many more pieces of ancient evidence are buried out there right now, just waiting to bridge the gap between ancient text and hard historical fact. Thank you so much for exploring with me, and keep questioning the history beneath our feet.